Every time you read a great book, it's easy to believe the author behind it is some unbelievable creative genius who operates on a completely different level compared to your average human being. But the truth is, behind every good book is a real person, a real human being. Someone with doubts, strange ideas, messy experiences, wild stories, and a life that shaped every page they wrote. So, welcome to Authors by Us, the podcast where we go beyond the book. Here we sit down with authors not just to talk about what they wrote, although we will talk about that, but about the stories, experiences, opinions, and moments that shape them into who they are today. By the end of the conversation, we want you as the audience walking away feeling like the author you once admired from a distance can now be one of your closest friends that you could now grab a cup of coffee with. So if you love books, stories, or the people behind them, make sure to hit subscribe and let's meet today's author. I'm here today with Kevin J. Laws to be exact. How are you doing today, Kevin?
I am doing well, and how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I joined one of your TikTok lives about a month ago, and since then I've been wanting to get you on, but scheduling, right? Scheduling, you had a road trip you had to go on, and I had a couple things going on from bachelor party and all this. So it's been quite the road to get you on, but I'm super excited to have you on today. To get us started, though, there's so much to talk about. You have quite the history to talk about, but before we get into any of that, for those in the back who want to get to know you a little bit more, who are tuning in, and that includes myself, tell us a little bit about Kevin. Who is Kevin behind the author, behind the TikTok creator, behind the guy who's live almost every single day, might I add?
That's wow, that's a lot. Let's see. Born and raised in Ohio. My childhood was wasn't the best. I left Ohio when I was 20, never looked back. I still have all my relatives there. I moved all over the United States. I was in the Army for 4 years and 8 months, military police. Started my law enforcement career in vocational school. My junior and senior year, I took a basic law enforcement class. So I've been in law enforcement for some form or fashion for, geez, like 40 years. Yeah, moved all around the United States. Let's see, Ohio, Florida, Arizona, Alaska, Virginia. When I was in the military, I lived in Germany for a little over 3 years. And we like to move every couple years.
Was it just the military that was causing you to move around a bunch, or were there other underlying things like you wanting to explore yourself or find yourself? Was that really the cause of making you want to move so much, or what's the reasoning behind that?
Well, the first couple moves was the military, and then once I got on with the government in Florida, when I first started, I was a Marine enforcement officer. A promotion opportunity came out to a special agent, so I put in for that and was promoted to a special agent. And then that caused me to get moved to Yuma, Arizona. If you don't know where that is, folks, that's right where the gates of hell are. Literally in the middle of the desert. Nothing grows there
I was about to
but
ask
dirt.
why is that the gate of hell?
It is brutally hot,
Oof,
brutally hot. But surprisingly, the bulk of the nation's lettuce comes from Yuma.
ironic.
Is dry. I know, as dry as it is there, the water level is only like 6 feet below ground. Why nothing else grows there is beyond me. But there's your trivia. So
So
yeah,
you
got to Yuma. Was there for exactly 6 years because my wife would remind me about once a week how much she hated it there. And so an opportunity came for a lateral, which means not a promotion, just a move to Alaska. So we did a whole bunch of research, you know, about the weather and all that stuff. And so we moved from literally the desert up to the tundra. We flew out of San Diego in November, got to Anchorage. But when we left San Diego, it was about 80 degrees. We got to Anchorage that evening, it was 20 with no winter clothes because where are you going to buy winter clothes in the middle of the desert?
true?
Yeah, and then we're in Alaska for 11 years. We had wanted to get back to our cyber smuggling center in Virginia because it was far enough away from family that they couldn't just pop in. So an opportunity came up. So that's where I ended my career at our cyber smuggling center.
How long were you in the military?
4 years and 8 months.
4 years, 8 months. Okay. And then was it from there that you transferred into Homeland Security and then a future job, which we'll talk about here in a second?
Well, that takes a bit of an explanation because when I started with the government, it was U.S. Customs.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I was a special agent with U.S. Customs,
Mm,
and then after 9/11, when they created Homeland Security, they took the special agents from immigration and the special agents from customs and put them together and created a new agency.
mm,
So that's how that come about. So you didn't have a choice; you were just automatically moved.
mm. So then all of this eventually led to you going into probably one of the paths that you talk about it a lot on your live. And for anyone who does join Kevin's live, it's a career that I didn't think anybody would ever do. And that's finding child predators online. What drew you to that position? I mean, you were in the military and you ended up in Homeland Security. Was that just a natural progression, or what even drew you to going further, even further down the rabbit hole, I guess we could say?
Well, no, that's a good question. When I started working this crime type, we were literally writing the bad guy pen. We were literally writing the bad guy pen to paper.
Mm,
I was helping another agent. We were posting ads in swinger magazines. And folks, if you don't know what that is, go out on the internet and look that up. There are periodicals that you would find in like a triple X bookstore.
mm,
And in the back few pages, they would have ads. So we would post ads in the back of them. And then check our PO box, and if somebody wrote to us, we would say, hey, if you happen to have an electronic mail address, because at that time, email wasn't even abbreviated yet. So I got in literally at the ground floor.
mm,
And then eventually my boss said, hey, Kevin, I put you in for this school called Basic Computer Evidence Recovery Training.
mm.
That is to learn how to do computer forensics. And what that is learning how to take a piece of digital media, where it be a thumb drive, hard drive, CD, DVD, and extracting evidence off of that in a way that's not altered, that it can be used in court. And along with that came the pictures and the videos, and it just morphed from there.
So you mentioned you were pretty much in this position. You started working at in this position when it was at ground level. What causes someone to get into this line of work? Was it a certain mentality you had? Was it an experience you had? Or was it just, did you just go from the military to, hey, this behavior of, we'll call them insane individuals, needs to be stopped and I'm going to be the one to do it? What was the true cause that made you go, yeah, I'm now going to spend a good portion of my life in this work that, let's be real, is probably one of the darkest places you'll ever be in?
Yeah. Well, I actually didn't say when I started this. This wasn't a big crime type. This wasn't a big crime
Mm,
type. There might be one person at every office that would be working this, maybe. A lot of offices didn't have people that work in this, so it wasn't what people think. Like, hey, there's a group now that does child exploitation. There wasn't any of that because it was literally at the ground floor. So I didn't know what I was getting in for.
mm,
I had no idea what was coming, and neither did other folks in law enforcement. Because right at the beginning, when the internet was just taking off, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. But once the gates of hell opened and that tsunami of evil came out, that is, you know, propagated by the internet, we were off and running. And I've said this before, it wasn't that I picked the job, it was the job picked me.
yeah. So you then went and you spent 11, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said around 11 years working undercover, and you would talk to a lot of people who were considered predators. What did that even look like day to day? Because I, I've tried my best to, before this conversation, to almost imagine it, and nothing comes to mind. I just don't have the mind for it, but what did that look like for you just on a day-to-day basis as you started to get more cases of this packing up?
Well, the first couple of years, my persona was that of a little girl, so that was pretty easy because you're not having intellectual conversations, uh, right? So eventually, someone came up to our office and said, "Hey, I want to show you another part of the internet where the adults hang out with the other predators." And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." So I figured, there would be code words and, like secret decoder ring and, all this
Mm,
slang that I would have to learn. So I went into one of the chat rooms and was hanging out. And yeah, there was none of that. It was just, my God, wide open. Hey, if you have little ones, this is what I want to do with them in graphic, nauseating detail.
mm.
It was just people commiserating, not commiserating, celebrating the fact that, hey, look at all of us. We're here now. We have a place to gather and talk about, raping children, and nobody's going to judge us.
What does that do to someone over time to work in that kind of environment? I mean, I want to talk a bit about your book, but I just want to figure out. I mean, I can only imagine most people wouldn't even be able to survive working in that type of environment for a few years, let alone you. Again, was it 11 years that you were working in this?
Well, total, just under 20.
Okay, so just under 20. And I can't even imagine doing that for a few years. So what does that do to a person? I mean, considering you were in this hellhole, you could say, for almost 20 years.
Oh, what does it do to you? Well, I don't have any modesty, which is really weird. I could stand in front of a crowd of 1,000 people giving a speech completely naked and not even be embarrassed, which is
Mm,
just odd. There hasn't been a week in memory that I haven't cried at least one day during that week. But the good part is I don't have nightmares, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But I do have some pretty bad PTSD, hence vicarious trauma. You're looking at all those pictures and videos and chatting with these evil people, and you don't know what is doing to you until after it's too late. Yeah, but I'm still here.
hmm. Yeah, and I'm
But
sorry.
yeah,
I'm sorry you have to deal with that because it's disgusting. Something that no one should have to deal with. So I'm sorry for that. But to move to a different note, you then took this experience and you wrote a book. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about the book? And I know you mentioned on the live when I was present that you wrote this book based on your experience. So, what is this book truly about? And who is the people that you're targeting in terms of those who are going to read it? Because this is a very, very serious subject.
yeah. Well, the book. So, how did the book come about? That's the first question. I never thought I was an author. Matter of fact, I hated English. It was one of my worst subjects in school. So, what do? I get a job where I'm writing all the time and end up writing a book. But so what? Okay, a little background. So there's a saying in law enforcement called a shit magnet. Yes, that's true. You heard that correct. So that is someone who gets a minor call, like a nuisance call, like a barking dog, and they go to the scene. They end up in a shootout with a homeowner.
Mm,
A couple of months later, they get a call to a traffic accident. They're like, "Oh, I'll just write a ticket, and this will be easy." And the trunk pops open, and there's three dead people in the trunk.
mm,
Well, when it came to this crime type, I was the shit magnet. I got the predators that the other predators were like, that dude is a freak.
Mm.
So early on in my career, my coworkers were like, Kevin, you get into some nonsense. You should write a book when you retire. And I'm like, really? And they're like, absolutely. So
Mm.
that's how the book came up. So what is in my book? It's my actual investigations. It walks you through by year. Um, yeah. So that's it's my lived experiences along with myself and the team that I work with.
And so who is the people that you're really looking to target when it comes to a book like this? Because again, this is not just your everyday fantasy book that almost anyone could pick up and just start reading. This is one of those topics that is extremely serious, and I assume you have a specific kind of audience that either you're trying to spread awareness or you're trying to just get the message out there so people can again just be aware of the amount of insanity that can happen around the world. So who is truly the people that you're looking to say, hey, this book is something that you need to read and this is 100% for you if dot dot dot.
Well, I think every new parent should read the book before their kids get old enough that they give an electronic device to. Because let's face it, when you hear the news reports, they're like, oh, XYZ was caught for child exploitation or doing this for a child, and that's all they say. Okay, and people's like, oh, that must be bad, and then the news glosses over it for the news has maybe a minute to go into a story, minute and a half. Any lawmakers aren't going to tell you. They're like, oh my God, this is really terrible. And they're going to have their press release and get their photo op, and that's it. So
Mm-hmm.
I told myself, I said, well, if I'm going to write a book, it's going to be exactly how it happens. And it's going to be in graphic detail, not so graphic that you can't finish the book, but graphic enough that it's going to feel like a punch in the stomach. So yeah, I think every lawmaker should be reading this book, every judge, attorney that prosecutes this,
Mm.
every parent before they give their kid an electronic device and just let them loose into the world should read this. And then they're going to realize, yikes, maybe I should educate my child about the dangers of the internet
Mm.
before I give them that device.
Which makes complete sense. Makes complete sense. As someone who is not a parent yet, or, well, not a parent, but definitely see myself having kids in the future, definitely it's a fear. I mean, it's a real fear, and I think it makes a lot of sense that you would want to target, or we won't say target, but you would want new parents to really delve into and see truly what can happen to their children, especially when getting on the internet. I was looking at a couple of reviews for your book. One person talked about how it felt like they were just having a deep conversation with a close friend and telling them stories about just something that's completely unsettling, but at the same time, even though it's dark, it's something that felt real, it felt raw, and it felt again like a close friend having that discussion with you. Is that something that you were aiming for with this book, just to really almost have a good conversation with people to let them in on something, or is it truly just trying to educate people as if this were almost a war and you had to warn them to get out of the country, or in this case it would be that this is a problem that you must know about, hurry up and read the book? Or were you trying to truly just have a conversation with people within your book?
No, that's the book was written as a conversation because I knew that the topic was going to be tough to read. So rather than putting in like Kevin did this or he did that or Agent Laws did this, I said
Mm-hmm.
I need to make this personal. So I told myself I said I was always a good storyteller. So I said, well, let me write it like I'm sitting down, just like the person wrote. We're sitting around a campfire, having a meal, having a beverage, and I'm telling you a story. That way, it just flows better. It's easier to read. It's not technical. And I feel it's more personal that way.
The book itself is apparently very graphic. It warns people up front. In fact, looking at some of the other reviews, people were just completely shocked by your experiences and what you have seen. Why, in your opinion, was it so important for you to just not soften the blow at all when it comes to this book?
Well, because if you're a survivor of this, and that's one thing that needs clarification. People say victims of this crime. You're not a victim. You're a survivor. You're only a victim of the crime if you don't make it out the other side. You're a survivor. So I I told myself if I'm going to whitewash this or gloss over this, I would be doing a massive disservice to the survivors of this crime type.
Mm,
Because, you know, I put myself in their shoes and I'm thinking, if I was a survivor of this, I wouldn't want the book to be like, oh, this is what happened. And they're like, well, no, that's not how that happens. Same way with the investigators that continue to work this. If I was to sugarcoat anything, that would be doing them a massive disservice. So I said, I'm going to write this exactly the way it is. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in my book that I tamed down. It could have been a lot more graphic, but you didn't want to go. I wanted to temper it, but I wanted to make sure that people know. Listen, folks, this is not what you hear about on the news or your whatever talking head you want to talk to or friend you talk about this crime. This is the way it happens, and this is the gut wrenching, horrifying details. That way, when you finish the book, people are like, wow, that was a lot. And then the next time they hear something on the news or one of their friends says, oh, it wasn't that bad, they're going to be like, hold on, let me tell you exactly how bad it is. Because here, read this book and then come back to me in a month and we'll have that conversation again.
yeah, it's always crazy how people will take things very, very lightly, but when you show them a real, truthful, raw experience, it completely changes their perspective and they look at it so much differently. So I 100% understand where you're coming from, not being, we'll call it wishy-washy with the experiences and the way that you wrote this book. Speaking of writing the book itself, you said a little bit ago that you didn't expect to be an author. You didn't like English, or at least the English class growing up, and you almost didn't want to be an author. The only real thing going for you was your storytelling capabilities. And so, how difficult was it for you to write this book? Because between the fact that you didn't think you were going to be an author, you didn't think you were a good writer, and on top of that, having to almost relive the experiences that you went through personally in order to write this memoir, there had to be so many difficulties that you went through just writing it, let alone other people reading it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it took me a while to compile it, to compile all the information. But did I like writing my book? No, I don't particularly like my book. People ask me that all the time. Kevin, what's your favorite chapter in your book? What's your favorite part of my book? I don't have a favorite part. I don't particularly like my book. I wish it didn't exist, but it's important that it does. I mean, that might sound weird to people, but I had it about 80% finished. I had about 80% finished, sitting at the desk where I am now, looking at the screen. And when I'm crying so hard that I can't see the screen to type, I quit. Um, and I put the book away for 3 years. And then eventually my wife said, you think you ever finish that book? And I said, well, now I need to finish it because it's in my head. So I need to finish it and get it out. So I powered through it. And somebody just asked me that the other night on one of my lives. They said, have you read your book since? And I said, no, I will never read my book ever again. It's too much. It was hard enough to relive those cases over and over again while I was rereading it, let
Mhm.
alone just sitting down and doing it leisurely.
Hence why I can't even
Yeah.
imagine you writing it. That had to be just extremely hard. And speaking of books in general, ever since this book, you have talked about before how you don't plan on writing any other books. And I think most people hear that from an author and they immediately question why. But in particular, I want to know, was it because of the fact that this was just a deep memoir that made you almost have that feeling of, yeah, I don't know if I want to write again? Or was it something emotionally that made you say, I don't want to write another book? Or in general, was it just the fact that you wanted to get this message out and that was it? And now that you've accomplished that, you think you feel fairly fulfilled and have no need to go further with writing any other books?
But yeah, I'm not an author. I wrote a book. That's it. I have plenty of material. My book covers 32 of my investigations, and I had 628 more. I could write about 28 more of my investigations, but now this is enough. This is more than enough for people to know what the crime is about. I don't need to be like, hey, I'm Kevin. I have 5 different books. I applaud people for that. The massive respect from me from people that writes more than one book. But that's not me. I'm a one and done. This is more than enough for me.
Do you feel like it's now your mission to, since you're no longer deep in on this career, I'm pretty sure you mentioned you retired from it. Since you are no longer working these investigations, and now that you've got your book out there, we see you live on TikTok almost every day. Does it feel like just a personal mission for you at this point, just to get your book out there and to just get people again aware of these situations or these types of situations? Because the way you spoke about not being an author, you would almost think that you would have written the book and then just kind of gone away from it, right? And kind of left it behind, if
Right.
that makes sense. So is this now just a personal mission for you?
It's definitely a personal mission. You have to get the word out there, and if you're not rich, you have a big marketing budget. So that's my TikTok. TikTok is my marketing. And now it's become my hobby, TikTok. I'm retired. My wife is still working full time, so it's just a routine for me now, and it does do good for me mentally because before I started doing TikTok, I had some really bad insomnia, really bad. I was averaging between 3 and 5 hours a night, sleep a night. Sometimes I wouldn't sleep for a day and a half, like none, you know, 36 hours or something like that, because I didn't have an outlet. I didn't. My brain was always churning. So now I go on TikTok a lot, as you said, nearly 40 hours a week. That's good because it gets my brain going. I don't talk about my book the entire live,
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
bits and pieces. And then we talk about random stuff, food or horses, or this morning's live we were talking about dogs and cats and stuff like that. So it gives my mind a break. So
Mhm.
that way, when I go to bed at night, I'm tired. I'm ready to sleep.
Does that apply to yourself when it comes to community then? How much do you advocate for it? Because it seems like after everything you've gone through, from your early career in the military to eventually hunting down predators online, and then now you're here on TikTok, I can't even imagine how crazy or how mad I would feel in the situations that you've been in. Does this mean that you're someone who's just now a big advocate for reaching out, because just having that fellowship with other people allows you to, like you said, have that outlet? How much more do you advocate then for community in almost any circumstance, whether that be survivors of this type of incident or yourself who has to go through PTSD dealing with these incidents in your head that you were investigating?
Well, community is huge, especially for this. You need an outlet. Personally, I can't talk for other people that's involved in this.
Hmm.
Isolation is a terrible thing. Isolation is a terrible thing. I'm a people person. I like people. I like to talk. So I still go to conferences. Matter of fact, I just got an email today from a professor at a university, and I'm gonna do some question and answer for his students. So yeah, just talking about it. Don't isolate yourself. COVID, yeah, COVID for me was really hard because my wife was working and I had nothing to do but sit here and be in my own mind, which is not good. But yeah.
You mentioned that now you got an email today. You're going to do a Q&A with a professor and his students. Is this something that you see yourself doing more? And have you done it quite a bit when it comes to just being able to utilize your experience to benefit newer generations, whether that be by teaching them about this or anything else that you have experienced? How has that helped you as you've gone on in your life since dealing with everything you've gone through?
Well, I've taught or not taught. I spoke at shoot, I just forgot the name of it. Darn it. Or here, not Hero Problem. Anyhow, we had a program with HSI about dealing with this stuff. I can't believe I just spaced on the name of it. Anyhow, peer support, peer support. So I've talked to them folks about my experience doing this, and I still go to conferences. I have 5 events this year. I just came back from a conference. I'm speaking to a group in Delaware. I do one case study, and so it's yeah. I it's good to get the word out for especially for somebody who's been in it for as long as I have. And and I tell people doing the thing if you're new here, this is my few words of wisdom, and I get to talk to when people come up to my table, I typically have a vendor table as well, selling my book.
Mm,
And I'll ask a lot of people. Most of the time, I'll say, "How long have you been in this field?" And recently, I was just in Huntsville at a conference a couple of weeks ago,
mm,
and a gentleman came up and says, "How long have you been in this field?" He said, "A year and a half, and I'm just about done." And I could see it in his face. I could
mm.
you see it in his face. He was done with this, and that's only after a year and a half. So yeah, I like the fact that I have the opportunity to tell people, listen, and this is what I tell folks. I said, if you're going to get into this field, first thing you should do is read my book. And I don't say that just because it's my book. You should read it just because you're going to find out what it's like. And then get a hobby outside of this field, right? And then get friends outside of this field. Because inevitably, what happens when you get together with friends from work, you talk about work. And for this particular crime type, you need to not have that. You need to be able to talk about anything. I don't care if it's basket weaving or fishing or needlepoint, whatever it is. You need to be able to talk to about something other than this to flush your mind.
What are some of those things that you would talk about or the people that you would hang out with? Obviously, now it's mostly, I assume, people on TikTok and possibly your wife. But what are the things that helped you to be able to go almost 20 years in this? Because you just mentioned someone met you and straight up said they were pretty much done. And you could tell that they were done. And it was barely a year and a half that they were in the field. What were the things that helped you to be able to go 20 years? Because that's, again, almost that's 20 times what that other man was going through. So, what were the things that helped you to just be able to, we'll call it survive going through 20 years of this insanity?
Well, I say stupidity, but that actually wasn't it. I was an extreme workaholic. When I
Mm,
mean extreme, I mean unbelievable. Most of the times I was in the office by 7 a.m. and it was routine that I didn't get home until maybe 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning.
mm.
Shower, rinse, repeat. I remember on 2 occasions when I actually slept at my desk, put my head down on my arms, slept for a couple hours, back and did it again. I never gave my chance. I never gave my mind a chance to relax. it was always going from one investigation to the next to the next. Sometimes I would have 4, 5, 10, 15 investigations going at the same time. And some, that's not to say they're all happening at the same time because that's not
Mm,
realistic.
mm.
There'd be, one I'm waiting for an email or I'm waiting for this or I'm waiting for that. But yeah, that's how I kept myself going because I didn't give my mind a chance to think about what was happening. And that's not a good thing because that came crashing down in a bad way.
I was just about to ask, did that result in anything that just caused you to feel absolutely horrible? Because, I mean, I like to think that I work hard, but in the field you were in, going over 12 hours a day on this journey, part of me would assume that that wasn't healthy and it led to potential problems. Can you go into why it didn't work why it worked, but then what were the results that came about because of it?
Why it worked is because, like I said, I didn't give myself a chance to pause. There was a couple occasions when I was working. One of them, we had a trial on a guy.
Mm,
Leading up to it, I got beat up by, use that metaphorically, beat up by the U.S. Attorney's Office and by my bosses. And then it went to trial. It was a 4-day trial. And then after the trial, the foreman for the jury and one of the other members contacted the judge before they left and said, "Hey, can we talk to Agent Laws and Steve, who was the prosecutor?" And they came up and they thanked us for that, and that was powerful. So I went back in the courtroom and I cried for about 10 minutes because that was the vindication of, hey, you went through months of being beat up by your boss, your boss's boss. And I said the U.S. Attorney's Office, but that's not fair. There was just one attorney at the U.S. Attorney's Office that was giving me grief. Yeah, and then there was another occasion where I'm just going to over this because then I'll start crying, and I don't want to do that. There was a time where my granddaughter said something to me, and that hit deep, and
mm.
I cried the whole way into work. And yeah, and there was shortly after that, remember I came home from work one day, and I told my wife I can recreate this scene just about line by line. My wife's in the kitchen. I walk up and I said, and this is a quote: "This is killing me. I need to quit." I knew it was not good for me. So we talked about it for 10 or 15 minutes, and I didn't quit.
Mm.
I kept going because there was nothing else that I really wanted to do, because I had a passion for it, and much to my detriment, I should have quit. I should have, even if it was to just sit in my office and watch the paint fade. I should have quit.
So then what did it look like for you to be able to, I don't even know if I want to call it start healing, but what helped you to, I assume TikTok was probably a part of it, but what's helped you to be able to just heal through the process then? Because this is one of those positions that we'll call it 1 in a million people will ever pick up, understand, or be able to even think about getting into. What helped you to be able to just come out of this and eventually just start healing after you retired? Again, if the correct word is healing.
No, that's fair. Um, just the fact that I wasn't working these anymore. That was a major break. After I retired, I was contacted by a group of attorneys, so I did some work with them for a couple of years. I used to teach a week-long online undercover class. I taught that once more after I retired. That was a bad idea. That was a bad idea. As a matter of fact, the first day of class, I'm standing in front of a group of detectives, and I'm thinking to myself, I shouldn't be doing this. I should not be doing this, because there was 2 or 3 times during the week that I was choking back tears, going, man, this is bad. This is bad. So I quit doing all of that. So now I don't want anything to do with the investigation. Any more investigations? I don't want to hear about it. Um, I rarely watch the news. Well, my wife watches the news, and I'm very selective about what I listen to. So I get my news from online. I'll read the headline. If it's something I want to read, then I'll read it. But when it comes to anything crimes against children, I can't do it. I can't do it. Matter of fact, my wife turned on a documentary a few weeks ago about this crime type, and I watched about 15 minutes, and she looks over and I'm crying, and she said, "Do you want me to turn it off?" I said, "Yeah, I can." I said, "No." I said, "You don't have to turn it off." I said, "I'll just put in my earbuds, and then I'll doom scroll on TikTok, and you can watch it." But she turned it off. I can't do it anymore. Yeah, there's enough bad stuff rolling around in my head right now. I don't want to put any more in there.
Understandable. I mean, even just sitting here so far, having talked to you so far, it's just I've talked with a lot of people, whether they're authors on this podcast or just people in general who have gone through some pretty serious things, and this is without a doubt one of the most stressful and dead serious things that I've ever talked with anyone about. It's honestly hard for me to even come up with questions here. But moving past all of this, you talked about how on TikTok it became a true outlet for you to be able to just talk with other people and talk about other things, and in general just to allow yourself to have a community where you don't have to be alone, and you also to an extent get to spread your message to bring awareness to this issue. What or not what, how did you find out that TikTok, was it just by chance that you started a TikTok and then just it picked up from there? Or what, or how, I should say, did you eventually come to this realization that, hey, TikTok may be an answer for me to be able to get out of my own head, basically, and have somewhere to go and people to talk to?
Well, I needed to market my book, so I was just searching the internet for things, and I kept running across TikTok. You know, the book talk on TikTok. Like, well,
Mm-hmm.
if you're selling a book, you need to be on TikTok. Everybody said it. I'm like, okay, well, let me try this out. And it started out pretty slow, and then it's just kicked off. Especially this year, sales have been quite good. And then I developed a community, and it's nice because, like I said, my wife works full time,
Mm-hmm.
and so I can go in and we can talk about. It's just like old friends. It's like, "Hey, Jalen, how's it going?" You're like, "What did you do today?" And you're like, "Oh, I took the dogs out and blah blah blah, and I went to
Mm-hmm.
Walmart. Yeah, cool. I painted the hallway and I cleaned the carpet upstairs. That's literally what I did yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So I can go in and I can talk about complete random stuff, just like we're friends. And in the middle of that, I can say, by the way, here's my book, and I give the little spiel about my book, and
Mm-hmm.
then people would ask random questions, and then we'll just move on.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just move on. So it's a way to market my book without sitting there talking about my book for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. I don't want
Have you gotten positive comments directed towards you personally from people who have bought your books? Obviously, you've gotten reviews and so on and so forth, but have you gotten any comments that, to go in more of a positive light, made you almost happy to have written this book? Because again, if we keep reiterating it, but this is a very deep, dark subject, and so you would hope that at the end of the tunnel there's a light, right? And my question to you is, have you gotten personal comments from others who have read your book and gone, whether it was they've gotten enlightened on the subject, or maybe it's helped them personally in some way, shape, or form?
to. Yeah, I've gotten both. And very nice. People will send me messages off of TikTok. I've gotten a few emails because my email address is in the book. I've
Mm-hmm.
gotten a couple of really nice emails from people, and just recently, someone off of TikTok, a family member, was arrested for this stuff, and
Mm.
they were asking me a bunch of questions about it. So I gave it without calling the person out on the
Hmm.
live. I did this a few days ago. I went through the process of kind of how it works and how the court system works and all that, because the person was obviously saying, "Oh, it's not that bad," blah blah blah. So yeah, so it's helped a lot of people. And yeah, I don't care about the praise. That actually makes me a little uncomfortable. People are like, "Oh, you're a hero," and um, and all that stuff, and not real. Every hero wears cape and all that stuff, and I try to ignore that because it makes me uncomfortable. But I take solace in the fact that someone will say, "Hey, I read this book, and thank you for that."
Why, why does that make you uncomfortable? Is it just based on your personality or just based on the fact that your journey itself was not easy and because of that, you don't really want to be praised? You just want to bring awareness.
Yeah, I don't need somebody to call me a hero. Just read my book and let's move on from there. Because no one does this to be a hero. If you are, you're not doing it for the right reason.
But as we go into a different light, you talked about how you have a granddaughter. You also, we haven't discussed much about your family. Tell us a little bit about how your family's doing and how they've helped you in terms of your career afterwards, and have they been a big effect, or have they had a big effect on you as you've been able to start healing throughout this whole process of, again, just dealing with so much?
Well, we never. My daughter read. I have two kids, a boy and a girl. My son hadn't read my book. My daughter did. My daughter also has a boy and a girl. Both of them have read my book, and my daughter is one of my moderators in my life. But did
Mm.
we ever talk about this? No. This is not a conversation that I would have with my kids. If they asked me about it, I would tell them. But would I sit down and say, this is me? No. To me, that's me bragging about myself, and I don't do that. Like I said, my daughter read my book. She's one of my biggest cheerleaders. Matter of fact, she keeps all kinds of stats on me and all this stuff, and it's actually kind of cool because she's like, "Hey, you've sold this many books today," and she'll text me and she's like, how'd the live go? How many books did you sell? And she's like, "This is how many you've sold this year," and all that. So that's really nice. And my grandkids know that what I've done, but has anyone really asked me about it? No. I think the fact that they read the book, they understand
Mm.
because that book is me. Yeah, you finish that book and you'll understand me A to Z.
You mentioned before how you were on a road trip before we scheduled for today. Are you usually going on these trips for, again, those conferences and so on and so forth? Or have you been able to use traveling as a way to, again, act as another outlet for yourself?
No, the traveling is the outlet because then now I get to when I go to the conferences, like I have CrimeCon coming up at the end of May. That's in Las Vegas.
Mm.
Go Vegas! So now I get to meet people in person, and that's really nice because then you get to talk about not only my book, but I get to meet different people, and that's really cool because I like meeting new people. I don't care what you look like, race, color, creed, nationality. I don't give a shit about any of that.
Mm.
If you're a nice person, you're a nice person. I'm going to talk to you. That's it. I don't, none of that stuff bothers me. They're like, "Oh, that was a black guy you were talking to." I'm like, "No, that was Dave." I'm like, "Hey, get over yourself, dude.
Mm.
It was just a person. That's it."
It's how the world should work. It's how the world should
Right?
work. But unfortunately, it doesn't. Speaking of, you talked about how in your book, if someone were to read your book, page one to the end, they would understand almost, if not everything about you. Is there anything outside of your book that people don't know about you that you would want them to know, if that they just wouldn't be able to learn from your book?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. I've never been asked that before. How about this? I didn't have a good childhood. Someone asked me that the other day. What's a good childhood memory? I don't have one.
Mm.
My dad was a vicious, mean alcoholic. He never touched me. I have two brothers and a sister, but countless times he beat my mom up. Countless times,
Mm.
and I turned out relatively okay. So this is what I would say. Don't blame your circumstances on your childhood. You can change. You can change. Your childhood doesn't define you. You define you. I realize it affects you and all that stuff. Trust me, I do. But don't let that guide you in the wrong way. Just because you've had a bad childhood, don't blame life on that. You can make life better for you. You can make life better for yourself.
Hmm. That's a phenomenal mindset to have. And throughout this entire episode so far, we've talked a lot about how you were able, or how you have had to battle with that mindset your entire life, almost between your childhood, military, uh, online predator hunting, all of that, and then writing your book, going through the experiences again. You're someone who, based on what I've learned in the past 57 minutes here, that has had to battle with the idea of not allowing your circumstances or what you've experienced to determine what's going to happen moving forward. Because with everything you've been through, you could have come out the other side a shell, a hollowed shell. And yet you've been able to remain Kevin. You've been able to remain as a real individual with real feelings, and someone who's willing to get out there and still meet people and have community and all these amazing things. What would your advice be to someone who is battling through, maybe not exactly the stuff that you've gone through, but in general, who's just battling with that mindset of, I feel like an empty shell and I can't really get past it?
Yeah, that's pretty tough. The only thing I would say is find some kind of an outlet, some kind of a good outlet, not like drugs or alcohol. Find some kind of a hobby that you like. Um, and friends, when you get older, it's harder to find friends, but you can find online communities where you can hang out. I have plenty of people in TikTok that come in and just every day they're just like, hey, I hang out in here because I just like to listen to you, and it's good. You need something to get your mind off of stuff and things. That's what you need. And recently, I just had someone say that in one of my lives. They said, "Oh, I come in here just because it's a nice relief for me." Yeah, that's what you need.
So, what does the future look like for Kevin now that you've written your book? You're currently on TikTok and you're currently using your platform as a way to spread awareness on this problem. What does the future mission or goal for Kevin look like in the next, we'll say, few years?
That's a good question. That depends on how my book takes off. You know, Nobody would believe me if I said, "Oh, I don't care if my book sells." Nobody would believe that for a second. So I'm always brutally honest. I would love to sell 1 million or 5 million of my books to get the word out there. That's what really I would like to see. I'd like to really see my book take off, and people, make it mainstream and say this is the book that everybody should be reading, and not for the way that you think, because people look at a textbook like, okay, I need to read this textbook because I need to learn about this because I'm in college, or I need to read about this fantasy book because I like dragons or vampires or what have you.
Hmm.
I would like people to say, refer to my book as, listen, this is life. There is horrors out there. You need to protect yourself, or learn how to protect yourself and your children. So that's why you need to read this book. That's what I would like to see.
That's awesome. I love that mission. I think that it's something that's super important. But If you, looking back at the person, whether it is your former self as a child or your former self who was deep into this work, do you think that that person would be satisfied with where you've gotten to at this point? Not even in terms of sales, but in terms of just finding a way to keep the mission alive while also just being able to feel more satisfied with the way you're living your life, and you don't feel like you're literally killing yourself with these very dark experiences.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. My younger self would say, "You did good, dude. You're still here. You're still powering on. So good for you."
Awesome. I want to thank you so much for coming on, Kevin. This was a great conversation. It's it's a subject that I'll admit I did not think that I was going to have the most interesting conversation about this, but I'm glad that we did, and we can help spread more awareness on this. I'm looking forward to seeing how things go for you in the future, and just to see where life takes you in regards to this mission that needs to be talked about more.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on. It was a good interview, and I enjoyed it. And I appreciate you for having me on here.
Thank you so much. Welcome to the Authors by Us closing thoughts section, where we talk about some of our favorite moments from this episode, and I ask you guys to do the same. So, this episode was a very serious episode. This was one of those episodes that, even though I was happy to have Kevin on, I thought his story was very interesting. It was also one that deep within I was battling, because as someone who definitely sees themselves having kids in the future, and as someone who is sensitive to these types of topics, not from a personal standpoint, but just in general, my initial thoughts for this episode was holy crap. And I think Kevin was, the way he put it was incredible, because he mentioned that he wishes that nobody would buy his book, that he doesn't want people to read his book, which sounds super counterintuitive, right? You read a book, or you write a book, I should say, for a purpose. And the fact that he's out here saying that he doesn't want anyone reading his book or buying his book says a lot. But at the same time, you can't help but understand what he's talking about, right? Because the fact is, we live in a society and in a world now where human behavior is erratic. And the fact that something like child predators exists is completely disgusting, and is something that needs to have awareness spread about it. But the fact that we even have to spread awareness on that subject is just absolutely ridiculous. But I mean, it's a thing that we have to deal with nowadays. And the fact that Kevin, when he was talking about his career, he brought up how he came into this on the ground level, and the amount of disgusting things that he would see. I got to talk with him a little bit more after the episode, and he mentioned a bunch more details that, yeah, it's completely insane what he had to go through, and the fact that he decided to continue this mission by spreading awareness and putting himself almost through that again is something that just makes me have the utmost respect for him. I think that the fact that he was willing to even stick with a job like this for around 20 years is, it's crazy to even think about, because I mentioned it in the pod, but I personally couldn't believe, I couldn't even do this for a few years or a year, let alone 20. So the fact that he was willing to go through that and then almost take his experiences and teach you and me about that, about this specifically, and make people more aware so that they can protect themselves and their children, etc., is absolutely amazing. And it's something that he definitely deserves all the props for. That's the first major thing that I wanted to bring up here. The second thing I want to talk about, though, is his history with being in the military, being in law enforcement. This is a man that has been through a lot, a lot. I mean, you're talking about a man who has traveled quite a bit, who was in the military, got brought into law enforcement, then had to deal with probably one of the darkest things that you will ever see anyone deal with. It's absolutely wild. And I think his story, there are not that many people who are going to resonate with it, but I think we all can definitely understand and appreciate what he went through so that many almost don't have to. I don't know. This is just one of those, it's one of those things where it's hard to sit back and look at what he went through and try to compare in any way, shape, or form to it, because the amount of experience that he's gone through. I will say, though, one of the things that I found quite interesting was the fact that he said that when he was, well, I think we brought this up after the episode, but he brought out this idea that if his kids were younger when he started in this career of hunting down predators, he would have, there's no way he would have been able to survive. And I get that, honestly, because I can't even imagine myself doing it now, let alone if I had children or whenever I do. So this to me was just, yeah, this conversation was absolutely, it's one of those conversations that you have to have, but at the same time, you wish you didn't. But one thing, the last thing I actually want to bring up here, and to bring this into a more positive light, because so far, I mean, this is just going to be one of those episodes where it's really dark, and it's really difficult to find anything that would truly resonate unless you've personally been through something like this, which if you have been, I am completely sorry. I anyone who has had to go through this and survive this is, it's just it's quite the situation, we'll say. But to go into more of a positive light, I want to talk about the way that he was able to deal with everything. Because when you look at Kevin's life and what he went through, we talked about it quite a bit so far, between the military, between law enforcement, between predator hunting, between going on to teach these things, between all of these different avenues that he's been through. There's enough trauma and enough issues with all of that combined to fill 10 lifetimes, right? But the way that Kevin found to be able to almost get out of his own head was to find outlets. And in from his perspective, it came down to two things that I noted. The first one was traveling. The fact is, he still teaches, he still wants to bring awareness, and that is kind of his mission now. So when he's traveling, that allows him to have one way of having an outlet. But then the second one, which I think is extremely important, and honestly probably even more important, was finding his TikTok community. Now, if you join Kevin's live, it is quite the vibe. He is a great person to hang out with. He will talk about almost any subject, and he's more than willing to understand you as a person and to truly meet you. And that's something that I think all of us need to do better. It doesn't matter if you've been through trauma, it doesn't matter if you have experiences similar to Kevin's. It's something that we all need, is an outlet and a way to healthily deal with whatever we are dealing with. Well, because a lot of people, he even mentioned it in the episode. A lot of people, when they find their outlet, they normally turn to some pretty bad things. Whether that's things like drugs or whether that's things like alcohol, right? There's a lot that people turn to in order to deal with the problems that they have. And for someone like Kevin, you could almost, and I stress, almost understand if he were to go down that alley, because with everything he has dealt with, it would almost seem like that's the predictable path. But the fact that he was able to find his community on TikTok and use that as a way to escape out of his own mind, as a way to get to know more people, while at the same time continuing that purpose of being able to spread awareness for this problem in a way that wouldn't affect him any further than the career already did. So, this is a message to all of us that no matter what you're going through, it's important to find outlets that are healthy that will allow you to get out of your own mind, get out of your own space, and be able to truly connect with yourself. And then as a result, connect with others. And then beyond that, find your healing process that will allow you to continue moving forward. So, those are just a couple of things that I wanted to discuss here. I'm going to keep this one a bit brief because, again, this episode is a very serious conversation. That you can this is not something that you can just skim over. This is not a problem that we can just look at and try to find the overly positive light in it. There's a lot with this subject, and it's one of those things that is very sensitive. So I think that I was glad to have this episode with Kevin. I definitely loved the conversation that we had, but I also understand that this is one of those things that should not be taken lightly. So I will definitely let you know this right now. If you're someone who has either dealt with something like this, or if you're someone who is currently raising kids or something along those lines, I would recommend that you at least gain some understanding on this because, like he mentioned before, a lot of news outlets and a lot of everything, whether that be the internet or whether that be your friends, family, associates, these types of situations get looked at very lightly. And they don't get I don't want to say grim, but they don't go deep. And that's a problem because this is one of those subjects that you must understand and you must be able to not just understand it, but figure out how you can prevent it to the best of your ability. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you truly understand the disgustingness of this of what these predators online will do or what they say and all of that. So definitely do not take this type of situation lightly. This is not something to be joked about. It is something that we need to continue spreading awareness on, and that is something that I definitely appreciate Kevin for. But with that, I hope you did enjoy this episode. Let me know what your thoughts are in regards to this episode. And with that, I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll talk with all of you next time.